I want to welcome everybody to the Daily Cheat Sheet here with Guy Goldstein, expert on most things. Golan will be joining us in a few minutes. State of the Union is tonight. And Guy, I love when President Trump does the State of the Union. I love when he does all the weaving of the stories, which was originally started, just so people know, by Ronald Reagan. He did it for the pilot that landed the airplane in the Potomac and saved many lives with the way he did it. So that was really the first time it was done. And President Trump and Stephen Miller, who helps write the speeches, and everybody that does it, they do an awesome job in weaving. So I can't wait to see how he does it with the Olympic team. The angel families probably will be there, just so on and so forth. He knows how he does it brilliantly.
To say, President Trump's State of the Union last year was a wild ride. State of the Unions are generally elegant and planned and politic, and Trump doesn't have those buttons. And I really like that. I think that it's the most honest conversation about the state of the country that you'll hear anywhere. Forget the podcast sphere tonight. Forget the news. Forget the pundits. You're going to get a fun, exciting, and wild analysis of where the country is straight from the president tonight. Last year, I believe he went for 99 minutes. This year, he said he's going to run long.
Well, no, this last year really wasn't a State of the Union per se, because he had just taken over. So it really wasn't what they would call a state. I think they actually didn't even call it the
They
State
didn't
of the
call it a
Union.
State of the Union.
Yeah.
It was an address to the nation that went on for 99 minutes of A-plus television.
Yeah, it's and by the way, the pilot's name was Lenny Skutnik. Just so you know, that's when when Reagan started weaving, it was the pilot's name was Lenny Skutnik. But it's listen, I think the State of the Union is amazing. I think the state of the conservative movement has the potential to be in massive shambles right now. But I think when you look at the border, when you look at the inflation, when you look at the bounce back from the economy, and these are from economists, I know, obviously one of them being Ben Stein, who looks at the economy and is in awe of it. And is everybody seeing the direct results? Obviously not. But if you're a blind man in a dark room could see so many of the results of Trump's policies in a year and a month. And if you can't, you're lying or you're in denial. And I hate the critiques, the critique that come from the conservative movement that, it's this constant, well, he shouldn't be focusing on this guy because what about the border in Maine? And, I'm like, well, what does the border in Maine have anything to do with what's going on in the border of a different region? You're able to, that's life. You could be able to focus on one and focus on the other, which he's doing.
And it's always worth remembering that there is no job in the world that has to juggle. There's no job in the world that has to juggle as many balls as the president of the United States of America. And the consequences for dropping the balls can be utterly catastrophic. So the fact that he does manage to keep so many in the air is an achievement not just of the president's, but of his teams. I can also tell you that one of the things about economics, studied economics at university, I never really spent too much time working in it, and I'm certainly no Ben Stein, but I think one of the real important things to remember about economics is economic policy has impact a decade and 2 decades out. Right. It takes time to turn the ship around. The fiscal policy and economic policy in the United States has run roughshod over the American people for some time, particularly since the COVID disaster and the massive amount of the massive growth of the national debt. All of these things have the potential to bankrupt the country. And the fact that the president has taken us away from a path that looked like the country was on the brink of total catastrophe,
Economic destruction,
to a path that looks like we're on the road to one of the greatest economic recoveries in recorded history is miraculous. Now, that doesn't mean we'll get there tomorrow, and it doesn't mean that the path doesn't require work, and it doesn't mean that people aren't going to feel the hardship as they go. There'll be some things that can be done relatively quickly to help reduce interest rates, which the president has been working with the Federal Reserve and Scott Bessent to achieve. There's reducing gas prices by securing the world's oil supplies, which is part of their president's foreign policy as well. So there are things that can have short-term impacts, but an economy turns around over a decade, not over a year.
Well, listen, that's very well said. And if you're tuning in, you are listening to the Daily Cheat Sheet. We are on Rumble on many days, if not most. and we do listen and look at what people have to say in the rant section on Rumble. And Dr. Gen C asks a very good question. It's the same question Ben Stein asked me yesterday, which is his approval numbers. Now, I don't necessarily look. I listen. I think polling. I think President Trump is impossible to poll. He's just impossible to poll. And Rasmussen, who's been the most accurate, even though Rasmussen is no longer with Rasmussen, has him at 47%. So when you look at the other polls that are being done, ICE is obviously a huge issue with voters. And it's one of those questions that when asked on the phone guy, it's what I do in the polling in the voting ballot machine box, whatever they want to call it these days, and what I answer on the phone are two totally separate things. President Trump is impossible to poll, but at the same time, I also think their messaging has been terrible. It was terrible on the Epstein stuff. It was really bad, not done very well. They're starting to do it now in regards to ICE by posting the pictures of the people that have lost their lives to illegal immigrants, right? I mean, just the number of there have been 1,400, almost 1,400 people killed by illegal immigrants and 5 people by ICE, supposedly, would be a good, would have been great messaging. So I don't necessarily know if I trust these polls, but we'll see.
So I think the thing about polls is that in part, one of the challenges, apart from the research bias, apart from the challenges that you have with the actual polling, polls in a vacuum don't tell you any stories, right? Research is only effective if you actually understand the story that it tells. If you look at other world leaders in other liberal democracies who also are going through the same things as the United States in terms of the rise of tribalism, the political partisanship, the explosion of social media, challenges with immigration and shifting cultures, all of the same symptoms that America is experiencing. If you look at any of the other countries that would usually be classified as similar to America, their leaders are sitting at sub 20%, right? The default today is that you cannot get to 50%.
By the way, just be clear. It's not sub 20%. It's closer to 10%.
Yes, in some case they are competing to see who hits single figures first, but I think Anthony Albanese is going to win that competition as a massive source of pride for Australia. We're a competitive people, and we will win the race to the bottom as well. But it's important to note Macron, Carney, Albanese, Starmer, all of the people who are the peers of the President of the United States in the world cannot touch the sorts of ratings Trump gets, even on hostile polls. Because the nature of our societies today is that 50% is an impossible task, and if you're getting to 30, you're looking good.
And listen, by almost all the polls, Dr. Gen C is looking at, it's close to 40%. They're at 40%. If you look at Rasmussen, and you always have to give President Trump the 5% at least, who are not honest. Look no further than the last election. Every polling site that is polling Trump at a certain number was off.
Listen, if you want to find someone popular in the polls, you can look at Erdogan, who's always coming out on top in the polls. Putin kills it in the polls. I think Maduro used to come out 90% or more in the polls.
Listen, Hamas is doing
Ayatollahs, Hamas. There are lots of people that perform well in the polls, but I'm not sure you want them as your leaders.
And so the Democrats, many of them are deciding not to attend tonight, which would be a nice break from them not ruining the State of the Union. But they're holding an alt event, and I find this to be really funny. They're sort of imitating what President Trump does or what conservatives have done, whether there's TPUSA or what Trump often does was just counter programming to certain things, and it's a terrible look, guy. I mean, going back from Nancy Pelosi to ripping the speech up to,
you remember Rashida Tlaib with her Wile E. Coyote sign?
Yeah, that's and listen, I love the idea that there are more seats for more people that actually want to attend. But this idea, listen, my biggest fear is the rift within the Conservative Party. My biggest fear is not the left. Okay, so when you have when you're leading presidential figure, which is Gavin Newsom, which I think everybody. So let's say your two leading figures are AOC, who in Munich didn't know where Venezuela was, what side of the equator it was on.
She knew where it was. She was just wrong.
Right. And
She very confidently said it.
when you have Gavin Newsom, pulling out like the Hillary Clinton way of talking to black people, that the only way they'll understand you is by dumbing down and saying, "Well, my SAT scores were 940, I couldn't read." So just this like the most racist rhetoric from these two types of from these. Well, I'm using Bill and use Hillary and Gavin as the racist rhetoric, and then you have AOC. We're not competing against that guy. We're competing against ourselves. And that is not a healthy thing necessarily.
We've been competing against ourselves since the election was won. And unfortunately, we're somehow managing to lose our competition against ourselves. I think that's the bigger problem. I know that Tucker Carlson recently visited the White House, and there were rumors that he may have had a bit of a conversation with some people about his recent behavior. They're only rumors. I don't know to tell you what's true. But again, is the fact that they're bringing Tucker into the White House to try to smooth things out a sign that they're trying to at least sweep the mess under the carpet until after the midterms, so that they don't cut off their nose to
Cut
spite
their
their
nose.
face.
Yeah. I usually get them wrong, so it's okay.
But yeah, so it seems as though there is an attempt to address some of these things between, particularly around the Tucker Carlson faction. Candace has gone right off the deep end, even further than we thought possible. But there does seem to be an attempt to sort of curb the chaos.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, because yesterday's meeting with Tucker was reportedly about him begging Trump not to go and attack Iran, and it was no access, no cameras, nothing was allowed as if Tucker was around. That was supposedly what the reporting was yesterday. And supposedly, yes, Trump said to Tucker, "You got to figure out this issue you're having with with the Jews, not just the Jews. I mean, we're nothing in the voting bloc, but with the Christian Zionists. You have to repair this damage, because the way it's headed, guy. I mean, I get where their calculus was in the beginning with Tucker. It's just the Jews, right? We could, how many of them? It's 30%. They're very few voters. They're New York. We're not going to win the Jews. It doesn't matter. Florida, we're going to win anyways. So it doesn't really matter with the Jews. But it was going after the Christian Zionists, which is the majority of your base. That takes it at that point, it's a problem. And I understand that. In the beginning, it was a trade-off between the Groypers and the Jews. Okay. Now it's a choice between
the base and the Groypers.
The Groypers and insanity and moral clarity within our country.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that the calculus made. I hate the calculus of it. I hate election calculus. I do not like that that's the way we have to think about things, because it means, and this is a problem around the world, it means that there are small groups that are just large enough that they get to pull the entire country in the direction that they want, despite nobody else wanting to go in that direction, right? That was how the Democrats started going off the deep end. The Democrats used to be somewhat sane. They had policies that today wouldn't seem out of place in the Trump administration. But then there was a small group that managed to achieve enough influence that they were able to shift the entire country to utter insanity. And we're still only just recovering from that. So
I don't even think we're recovering from it. To be honest with you, I think the word recovering is you got to know you're sick first. Are we pushing it back? Yeah. Are we like holding it back for now? 100%. But as you saw with the Susan Rice video that she put up, who's on the board of Netflix, who posted that if Democrats win, this is, they will create all types of hell. To sum up what she said, that's what we're holding. That's what we're holding it to. Holding back from.
And there were two things holding them back. One of them was Charlie Kirk. The other one was Donald Trump. And one of those things has been assassinated. And the other one they keep trying to assassinate. So we're not in a great place. And still, it's a better place than we were in a year and a half ago.
Listen, there's no doubt about we're in better positioning. The problem is we should be even in better positioning. And listen, if anybody that listens to this show knows that for months since we started, I've been talking about the Tucker problem, the whole grifter movement, and there's the top tier grifter movement, and then there's the lower tier grifter movement. And sadly, Charlie Kirk, listen, I don't blame him for this. And I've talked a lot about this. He was very young. He was extremely young. And I'm not friends with the people I was at 31 that I am at 49. Okay. A lot of the people that I was friends with at 31 aren't in my life anymore. Mistakes I've made, mistakes they've made, but you grow up, you make decisions,
Hmm.
and you make healthy decisions. And he was surrounded by some of the, again, I don't blame him for this. It's very hard when you're 31, you're building a business, you're new, you're married, you have a couple kids, they're very young, to try to figure out up and down. I challenge
Hmm.
anybody at 31 that was on the mission and path that he was at to be able to do everything 100% perfect. But one of the things, much like Trump, he was surrounded by some of the worst scumbags humanity in America has to offer right now. And I'm talking about whether it's Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, Jack Posobiec, Benny Johnson, the list goes on. And of just degenerate scumbags that are in this universe. I mean, I can't
Hmm.
use that word enough. Degenerate scumbags that people are listening to. And I'm like, I understand, you were saying the word Judas before the show, that these are his
Hmm.
Judases. And I understand what you're saying, that we didn't put that in the title. We don't want to offend everybody with our title.
We
But
prefer to offend them later on in the episode.
here, but no, but here's the thing. These aren't like, these are like, they're like low level Judases. They're not like the high up type of traders. I mean, that's like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly. These are bottom of the barrel grifters.
Yeah, look, and first of all, yes, to everything you said, and I think that you're right. It can't be said enough how much of a pack of worthless human beings these people turned out to be. I think there was a sense, and again, just to sort of give a bit of an interpretation, if you go back to 2014, 2016, when a lot of this started, the culture war really started around that period with Gamergate. That's when it exploded into sort of the online consciousness.
It's so funny you bring this up, because you're not aware of this, but one of my dream guests on this show was the person that supposedly started Gamergate. Now, the reason I want him on the show has nothing to do with the Gamergate thing, but it was Adam Baldwin, no
Mm.
relation to the other Baldwins that started Gamergate. So he's like my dream. I could get anybody, but he's like my dream guest to have is Adam
Wow,
Baldwin. But
interesting.
well, I love him. I mean,
Yeah, it would be a phenomenal interview.
I don't
I'd
even
love
want to
to.
talk about Gamergate. I have no interest in talking about Gamergate. I'll let you do that, but go on.
But again, it's important to note that at the time that that happened, the whole world was moving very quickly to a very radical place on the left, and there were very few voices on the right that had any reach, particularly amongst people under the age of 30. And so what you had was this sort of almost like this band of brothers moment, where it was this small ragtag band of survivors who had formed up as a resistance against the machine that was, and so I think that there was a lot of trust given where maybe it shouldn't have been given because of that shared sense of vulnerability that people had at the time. And I think the way that it evolved was some people found a very genuine calling, which I think that Charlie found a very genuine calling. I think he was called to Christ through his mission. Through his mission, I think originally he was really focused on conservatism. He moved into Christianity, and it was a really beautiful transition to see him go through. And then a whole bunch of other people were called to money, and so the people who he had trusted at the time because they were in it together evolved in a very different direction, and that direction was it, it was and it was antithetical to everything that Charlie ended up believing in, and it was antithetical to everything that we believe in.
And again, here's the thing, I really don't blame him. He was a 31-year-old kid who had the opportunity to meet a few times, but he was
Well,
a
he was 20
30.
at the time.
No, I thought
He
he
was in
was
his
30.
early 20s.
No, when he died, I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, but he was a baby. I mean, he was a real baby dealing
Mhm.
with the worst swamp creatures the swamp has.
But that's
And
already at the end of his life. I'm saying
yeah,
he got into this and when he was what, 18?
yeah, very young, yeah, 18.
Like What do you know about the world when you're 18? How do you tell the difference between a predator and a friend?
That's an exceptional point. It's an exceptional point. And then one of the things people, I think we all like to pride ourselves on, is a sort of loyalty.
Mhm.
And at a certain point, blind loyalty does get you in a lot of trouble. I think President Trump is one of the people that could attest to that. And I think it happens. Listen, again, to err is human, forgiveness divine, or however you want to say it. It happens to all of us. But we're faced with this reality, and the reason, I mean, obviously, this is a big issue right now, is because I hate giving this person air, but you have Candace Owens making this insane television, this mini series about Erica Kirk and just going after Erica Kirk. And now it's really, I mean, it's one of the most telling things that none of these so-called influencers are speaking up for the widowed bride, their best friend. And here's the thing. So I understand that somebody wants to say, "Guy, well, don't give her air," right? That's a fair thing. Like, don't give her air. Don't let this stuff breathe. But at the same point, those same people are still making money off of Charlie Kirk. So that's the rub. If you're going to still be making money, and these people are actively trying to destroy what Charlie built, which is TPUSA, then yes, you need to stand up to these people. And it's like, I don't get it. I don't get why anybody would listen to somebody like Benny Johnson or Jack Posobiec or any of these people. I don't get it.
Look, it's also the matter of, starving a fire of air only works to a certain point. You cannot starve what Candace Owen is doing of air. It's there. It's everywhere. It's being talked about. It's being pushed. It's algorithmically supported, right? If you were a genuine friend of Charlie Kirk's, you have not even a moral responsibility, just a personal responsibility to defend his wife. You have a personal responsibility to protect his children. You have a personal responsibility to protect his legacy. It's not even a moral thing. If that was the relationship you have, if you were to consider someone your friend and they were to come under attack, the first rule of mateship is you stand up for your mate. And if they're not doing that, then they were never friends in the first place. They were just people who thought he was useful.
Well said. Gen C in the rant says, you're 100% correct. We are repeating ourselves because certain things do need repeating. I have no problem, as I will constantly use the most writers or whatever it is, that they do tend to write about the same things over and over and over again. There is a need for repetition when it comes to this, because people are not getting the point. And you ask a question, why is President Trump down in the polls? Or why is his approval ratings not as high as they should be? This is a major reason. And this is a major reason that nobody is talking about. So it's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to discuss. And unless you're willing to confront that elephant, we will become the left. The left's biggest mistake, Guy, and we saw this happening, was when they let the left take over the Democrat Party, when they let the
Mhm.
squad become when they thought they could do a control burn with the squad. And then what happened? BLM happened, and it set everything ablaze. We don't
Right.
know God forbid, we don't know what's going to happen in a month or 3 months or 6 months that could get this so out of control, there is no coming back. So if we don't speak up about it, who will?
It's also noted that when you're talking about the question of polls, one of the things that you need to be paying attention to is polls are an indication of how people feel, not what people know, right? And so the things that we're talking about here, the internal challenges that we're seeing in the Republican side, we know that 50% of the country will never see a good thing that Donald Trump does off the bat. They will never see something positive that the president does. And even when they are enjoying the benefits of the positive change, even when they are enjoying the cheaper gas or they are enjoying the cheaper food prices at the supermarket, they will not connect that to the president. That's because they live in a completely separate reality that's driven by a set of emotions that is not connected to policy. On our side, we increasingly have or on the Republican side, we increasingly have a cohort that suffers from the same problem. So when you're talking about the polls, there are, well, I guess, but we understand there to be about 13% of the people who are currently in the Republican 10 who are also currently seeing a world in which then there is no connection between anything the president does and anything good. And all that he does is support the Jews and listen to Benjamin Netanyahu and whatever it is that they sell to their audience. So the reason this matters is because what what the polls are telling you has nothing to do with the president's impact on the reality on the ground in the United States, and everything to do with how people are being influenced by the sorts of people that we're upset about, in a way that they cannot see the benefit that they're getting from this administration.
Listen, 100%, that's well said. And if look at New York right now with Mamdani, right? So you have New York police officers who are getting pelted with snowballs, right? And snowballs is just a start. And Mamdani says it's just a it's a snowball fight, or so whatever, however. And trust me, it's not. It's just a campus rally. It's just a snowball fight. It's
Right.
just this. It's just this until
Permission
it's
structure.
not.
It's a permission structure. The same thing happened during the summer of love in 2020, right? It's just a soda. Well, the same soda could just as easily have been a glass bottle. It could have just as easily been a Molotov cocktail. It could have just as easily been a brick. The fact that it happened to be a soda that time doesn't mean that the police aren't now actively threatened with assault with potentially deadly weapons. And that creates escalation on the side of of law enforcement, right? Which triggers a cycle. And so that pattern of permissions is part of a strategic approach to agitation that's designed by the college agitators from the 1960s and 70s and has been passed down as part of a playbook, right? It's Saul Alinsky, I believe, is behind a lot of these ideas, these rules for radicals. But it's intentional, and yes, this time it's a snowball. But if a snowball can hit a police officer, so can anything else that people want to throw. And if the police officer has to restrain himself, then that establishes a permission structure for people that want to throw things at them, that they know that the police officer will hold back and not react.
Well, look at the recent event where that New York City policeman, right? He threw a couple of years back, he threw like an ice chest or something at a criminal that was escaping on a motorbike or motorcycle, and he hit him and he died. And he's sentenced to prison right now, that officer. It's like one of those stories that got very little coverage about this police officer, that all he was doing was trying to stop a criminal, and he was found guilty of manslaughter. And
I
this
haven't
is
heard
sorry.
that story.
That's it's exactly right. He was trying to escape on a motorcycle. The police officer, I believe, threw like a cooler or something at him, hit him, and he was found guilty a few weeks back. There
Wow.
you have it. Yeah.
He should get a promotion. That sounds like an
It's
incredible feat.
100%. I know what aim. And
Right?
it's so funny because everybody that would say, don't use a gun. Well, he didn't use a gun. He used a water cooler or whatever or a helmet or whatever he threw at the guy. What seemed like a much healthier thing, but in New York, he was found guilty. And if you're a New York City policeman right now, and this is going to spread across the country,
Mhm.
that's what people fail to recognize. Is this, as you said, this lack of having a moral compass, and that's why I brought up in the beginning of the show, where I said, this idea with, because it was Tucker Carlson who brought up with Mike Huckabee about the border of Lebanon and the border of Maine. And, it's, I get it. It sounds good what you're saying, Tucker. It sounds good. Yes. What are the people on the border of Maine? Like, I love that. I love that all of a sudden, when it comes to certain things, everybody cares about the borders within, they care about the plight of the American when they never did before. But there you have it.
And I agree. And to bring us to close off the Tucker conversation, by the way, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the open source intelligence that's going around at the moment, but whatever Tucker was asking the president for, the president has sent between 6 and 11 F-22s to an airbase in the south of Israel or not. So it seems as though the president is taking Tucker's advice with an appropriate grain of salt.
No, here's the thing. What we need to explain, and sorry if we're repeating ourselves, but there's a reporter named Barak Ravid who works for Axios, who's Israeli, who's serving in the Israeli military, who is as leftist as possible, and we've done it on the show where Golan looked up pretty much every headline of his for the better part of 6 years, and they're all the same. So he was the one that spread the rumor yesterday from Axios about that, General Kane, Raisin Kane, briefed the president that he doesn't think the Iran thing or whatever, however the briefing, however it was framed by Barack Ravid. So Trump came out and said this is absolutely not true. It's not a correct story. And I love Barack Ravid's response was, it was like, no, that's exactly right. You know what I mean? Like nothing was sourcing at that point, guy, nothing like that. But this is what we're up against. So
yeah, and this is Barack Ravid's been doing this since the Obama administration. He's infamous for having anonymous sources in any corner that can say the convenient thing that he once said, allegedly. It's hard to even go into how much of a nonsense it was. What I can say is President Trump's response was phenomenal.
But I want you to bring up the point, like it's the straw man argument, and it's just something that's always driven me crazy. Listen, whoever runs Maine runs Maine, okay? Whoever runs Los Angeles, and I live here and I don't know, runs Los Angeles. And good to see you go on. And so whoever runs our cities, it's not done federally for the most part. Okay, so this idea that if we go fight Iran, that has something to do with the people in Maine, when the two of them have nothing to do with each other. It's not, sadly, 80 billion or 40 billion or 100 billion is missing from Los Angeles for to help the homeless. There's nothing President Trump or anybody could have really done to stop that. Now we can investigate it, but this idea that we can't do one and not the other is absolutely ludicrous and childish thing.
It's sort of the same argument as we don't have healthcare. We don't have universal healthcare because we give $3.8 billion to Israel for military aid. It's this idea that somehow America exists in a vacuum. And I think it's an important thing to touch on, which is, yes, money is fungible, right? A dollar spent in one place is a dollar that you can't spend somewhere else. Having said that, the source of America's treasury is America's power, and America actually has to invest in maintaining that power, the same as you invest in maintaining any other form of income. America cannot afford for the world to come apart at the seams because that will impact America's economy. It will reduce America's overall GDP, and it will mean that there is less money coming into the government, which means that you're shrinking the pie that you're sharing out. So maybe it's distributed more the way that you want it, but it's a smaller amount, and anyway you're going to reach those deficits. The only way to win is to stay on top, and that's what the president's trying to do, and it requires addressing multiple issues simultaneously, domestically and abroad.
Well, Golan, it is good to see you. I would love to recap and repeat what we're saying, but Dr. Jen C in the Rumble rant says we've been repeating ourselves, so I do not want to repeat what we've already just discussed.
But also, you will be punished if you do.
Yes, apparently. If it's not Jen, then it's the AI. One way or another, we're getting reprimanded.
I know you like. Oh my God! On that YouTube short that David posted, or on holy cow, the reprimanding we were getting. And I'm like, and I love that. Like here's the thing: it's okay to have a response. Like if you think we're wrong, come at us with a response. Don't say to me that was a childish answer for Bibi Netanyahu. Like what? Like. That's your response to what I said. Like be a little more educated, be a little more, the word I'm looking for that I can't think of myself.
Yeah, don't be an a-hole. Look, here's the thing that happened on that particular one. I had to restrain myself in the worst way in order to not respond to every comment that you got on that particular video, because I was about to open up a class that looked like the white man can't jump basketball court. So I decided not to, because it was clear that we were dealing with mental midgets. But yes, please, if you have something to say, go ahead, let us know in a substantive way so that we can respond to it or change our mind. I love changing my mind. I think we all do. I absolutely. It doesn't happen very often, but I love if you can convince me.
That's what the AI says. Golan doesn't love to change his mind.
AI knows. AI always knows.
Anyway, so what we were discussing, though, obviously, if you look at the title of the show, is the conservative movement is. Listen, I love the conservative movement, and I have been one for a long time, and I'm very scared of what's becoming of it, and I'm really deeply disturbed with the voices that are not speaking up for it right now. And listen, it's like Ted Cruz and there's a few Republicans that speak up right now, Golan. But what's going on with Iran, right? I love that, in one way, Tucker is accusing Mike Huckabee of it being a traitor, when Tucker Carlson, we know, is being bought off and paid for by Qatar and isn't supposedly in the White House begging him not to attack Iran? Who is the traitor there?
Well, I think it's quite obvious that when someone is accepting money, and look, I don't have the receipts in hand, but we're not fools, and neither are any of you. Those of you who do not know definitively that this man has changed every position he's ever had, and in ways that are volcanically opposite of anything that he's ever believed, including, by the way, all of the anti Jewish, anti Israeli stuff and anti America stuff that he's been spewing, which is, again, diametrically opposed to anything that he's ever said. If you haven't figured out that he's been paid off, it's because, again, you don't want to figure it out, or you dislike the people he's going after. And so you're cool with it, even though you know that he's a bad actor. Yeah, clearly. This man is a traitor to the country, is a traitor to the cause, is a traitor to the conservative movement, is a traitor to MAGA, is a traitor to America as a whole. And the interesting thing is you're right. It's the conservative movement in general is becoming, I mean, the recklessness that we're watching happen, where this lack of conviction is, by the way, and I mean amongst people who agree with what you're saying right now, Judah, a lot of people who are saying this movement is getting really scary or getting really weird, or it's going in directions I didn't expect it. But they're silently sitting on their hands, waiting for somebody else to step in to stop it. And when you watch guys like Huckabee, or like what you mentioned, Ted Cruz, and a very small handful of others who are speaking up, they're being attacked as well by these bad actors. And so everyone else sits down because they don't want to get their head up. There's an old saying in Europe, which is a very European saying, very anti-American, in my opinion, kind of saying, which is, you want to be careful not to stand up, because like the blade of grass that is taller than all the others, it is the first to get cut down. Right? Can you imagine a less American saying than that? And that's what's happening right now in the conservative movement. Everyone's keeping their head down, hoping that somebody else is going to be the squeaky wheel and somebody else is going to fix this problem. It's not going to happen unless we all stand up and say enough.
Guy, I saw your lips moving. What are you
Another
faking me out?
the other thing is that we have seen this before, right? I think it's contrary to popular belief. Most of my friends actually aren't conservative. Many of my friends are liberal. Some of them are very liberal. Some of them are radically progressive, but on the same side of it. There was a period where we saw that they were inside a party that was driving at 100 miles an hour towards a cliff, and they were afraid to say, we should stop. Guys, we should stop. And they were going along for that ride with this. They'd say, yeah, look, I don't agree with this, but I agree with all these other things and principles. So I'm still part of it. And you could, the whole time they were still along for the ride, keeping their mouth shut, going, yeah, they'll take their foot off the gas. We're not going to Thelma and Louise this. We're going to stop. And then at some point, they just realized that they were now soaring through the air. There was no longer a road beneath them. The party that they had trusted had gone absolutely mad. And, their response was eventually that they started moving towards the sort of lost center and abandoned the party, right? We've seen this play out before. We've seen where silence goes when you're supposed to be part of a team and you don't speak up, right? The silent majority fails every time. Doesn't matter what situation, whenever we've relied on the silent majority, it has failed. You're either vocal or you're out of the game. And if you stay out of the game, don't blame us when the car goes off the cliff.
Listen, I think I think the silent majority obviously did help get Trump elected, but it doesn't help conservatives stay in power. And this becomes the biggest problem Republicans have so many, you could trace it back to Nixon, which is the silent majority, or with Reagan. And you could really the problem is you're silent and then you're letting everybody else get their voices in. And before you know it, the party you voted for isn't said party go on.
But that's exactly right. As you're saying, that's who got Trump elected. But that was before. That was before. And like Guy is talking about, and we've talked about many times on the show, we watched the left go through this. We can handle these crazies. We can bring in this fringe contingent who are spouting the wackiest stuff you can imagine. It's no problem. We are the majority and we can control them. And therefore we'll let them in because it gets us some extra votes. No problem. Our tent is wide and deep and all the rest. And they let them in and they took over the party, and the entire party, again, kept their head down, let them take over. And now it is a party of crazies. I was talking to a friend of mine today who pointed out to me that she is still, as far as she's concerned, a liberal, but she cannot look at anything the left is doing without seeing evil. See how she separates liberal from the left. And we are right now at that tipping point on the right, where we are watching the fringe crazies and the bad actors and everybody else that we're talking about pulling the party over to that fringe edge again. And just like what happened on the left, everyone's keeping their head down, thinking, well, let's let in a couple of Nick Fuenteses because maybe the Groypers will vote for us, or maybe this group will vote for us, or whatever else. And then little by little, we're becoming the party of the Groypers and the party of the Tuckers, and all the rest of us are just cowering in the corner, hoping that, at least we're not liberals or something like that. And we're all just going over the cliff.
Yeah, it really does show weakness, and we discussed a lot of that in the beginning of the show. But one of the things I want to quickly talk to both of you about, Ben Stein talks a lot about building up and spending on defense. It's a big thing of his, and he's like, even if it was his father's too. It was like, if you spend $2 and you waste one, spend more, whatever it is. It doesn't matter how much you're spending, spend more on defense. And one of the things, I don't know if you saw this story, but this should be a very scary story, is that even with all the ships that we're sending there, that we have like a 5 or 6 day window of fighting the arsenal that Iran has ballistic missile wise. And this doesn't scare people, that even at our best, with all the weaponry we have and all the defense capabilities we have, at best, we have a week, let's say. Let's just be fair and say we have a week. When I read that on a credible site from a credible source, you're like, wow, it's a little scary.
It's a little scary. It's funny. You
It's
say
the
it's a
air
little scary.
defenses. It's the air defenses.
Right. I mean, what you're talking about is not only a very short window, but this is something that is not being talked about. You haven't really heard a lot of people talking about that outside of maybe Israeli intelligence. I don't know if you saw this. I saw this in the Times of Israel. Is that what you were talking about?
It might have been, yeah, which I
Yeah.
usually don't trust, but
Yeah, but the thing is, this is one of those things that not only hasn't been talked about, but when it was mentioned there, you could see that they were pulling from sources that knew what they were talking about. And the air operations against Iran, they're basically going to hit limits very, very quickly. And this is a group that a lot of people are telling us is not a real threat to America, is not a real threat to the world. And we're talking about with the largest aircraft carriers that exist on Earth, the largest arsenals that exist on Earth being put in place, we're still talking about a time delay. We're still talking about a time limit, rather, a logistical and strategic time limit. This is a massive thing. Iran is not the paper tiger that many people make it out to seem. Some people were comparing it to Russia and saying, oh, look what happened when, we thought Russia was a big bad animal. Ukraine went in. Turns out we saw that Russia folded like a house of cards. That's not Iran. Iran literally has had no purpose other than building up militarily in order to XYZ, whether that's America, whether that's Israel, whether that's the world. That's the nuclear potential that, of course, we were managed to quell with that initial strike, and they've been trying to rebuild since. The proxy networks, which Israel's been taking out, but they've been quietly rebuilding. The missiles and drone arsenals that they have, that they've again been rebuilding. This 5-day window matters because while the U.S. is the greatest fighting force on Earth, it's not unlimited. And their war fighting capacity can't be shattered overnight, which means we have to not only be strategic, and it's not like they don't see us coming. They know that we are ready for war, and so they are also preparing for war. And the short blitz can only do so much. This is something that is going to have blowback, and we have no choice but to prepare for it. That's worldwide.
yeah, I think extremely well said. And Guy, to his point, the reason why this is such an issue is obviously because we do not want to put troops on the ground. So
100%.
we're basically saying the only way we are going to fight this is through the air. That's so let's be honest about what we're talking about. If in different times in a different world, this would be a real combat mission. But because, and I understand it, Americans don't want to see, neither do I, any American lives any American lives hurt or dying or whatever it is, it's limited to an air campaign. And the truth finally came out about why it's taken so long.
So I think there's a couple of things that are worth considering. Leave aside Russia, that's a conversation we can have later. But if we're focusing on the Middle East and Iran, it's worth starting from the fact that all war is about one plan versus another plan and finding out how reality shapes out. So, as an example, Iran had a huge ballistic arsenal before the 12-Day War as well. There were predictions that had held Israel at bay for almost a decade that if Israel struck Iran, Iran would rain ballistic missiles down on Tel Aviv and there would be thousands of people dead. That was the reason that Israel didn't directly take on Iran, despite Iran for over a decade financing, funding, and arming proxies that were attacking Israel on a daily basis. Once the war started, the Israeli strategy understood, the Israeli plan understood the Iranian plan. And so part of Israel's response was that once they had the aerial dominance, they had planes in the air, big, beautiful American planes for the record, planes in the air, circling, waiting for launchers to try to come out and launch a rocket, and playing whack-a-mole. Because the limitation wasn't the number of missiles that the Iranians had, it was the number of stationary and mobile rocket launchers that they had. And so the Israeli Air Force, because they achieved aerial superiority, were able to eliminate, the estimates are about 50% of Iran's simultaneous launch capacity. And at that point, if you don't have launchers and you can't wheel them out because there are planes that are going to destroy them the moment that they come out of hiding, it doesn't matter how many missiles you have in the stockpile because you can't fire any. And so this is something that has, the same was true, by the way, of Hezbollah. There was a threat of 150,000 missiles that were directed at Israel in the north. One pager operation caused enough chaos that the IDF were able to take out most of the launch infrastructure, not the storage infrastructure, but the launch infrastructure. And those missiles never came. The 10,000 casualties never happened. 10,000 casualties was the estimate. The end result of Hezbollah was 0 civilian casualties, or 3 civilian casualties. Maybe I have to check the exact number. It was negligible for what you would call a war, right? So yes, Iran has ballistic missiles. Yes, America and Israel and US allies have a limited amount of interceptors. But those 5 days are a lot of time when you have the amount of firepower that America has brought to bear here, and that's not including the amount of experienced firepower that Israel can bring to bear to support that.
No, yeah, but I think the bigger point, though, guy, is and go on. It's what Ben is constantly talking about. It's when we saw a COVID happen, our cupboards, right? We had nothing. Our stockpiles were nothing. This is one of those things. Go on. This you wouldn't even think this would be a discussion of having, running out of interceptors. Now I understand Israel, running short of interceptors, which they actually did. But the thought of America running out of interceptors is a really frightening thought. And I don't care if it's 10 days. This is one of those things you'd think it would be like we'd have, that every defense contractor, but we've cut back on many of those things. And you can't just build these things quickly overnight. And we really need to start spending as much money as possible go on our defense.
You also have to take into consideration that there's quite a lot of firepower that had been given to Ukraine and had been put aside that we haven't replenished yet as well. And to be honest, when you talk about the economics of war, missiles are cheap compared to interceptors,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, that's the funny part is that, when the Houthis were doing their thing, they were sending sometimes drones that you could buy at Radio Shack over. And in order to stop the drone, Israel or whoever it was that was intercepting them at the time had to put up $1 million missile or something like that. And the lopsided cost of war was insane. And so this is something that is just people just don't talk about how interceptors are these exquisite, like intricate, expensive, slow to replace systems that we have burned through pretty quickly in the past. Right now, I think every modern missile war burns through them faster than anybody wants to admit. This is a real thing we have to take into consideration. And the stockpiles, many of which right now are in Ukraine, just they haven't been replenished.
Yeah, which is extremely negligible. Obviously, a lot of them were being sent over pre-Donald Trump's. But this should be one of those things that should be 24/7. Every company that could possibly, just like with COVID, that was building the the breathing machines. I'm blanking on the name of the breathing
The
machines.
respirators.
The respirator. Thank you.
Yeah.
The respirator. Thank you for that. The respirator. I told you, guy. You got it wrong all the time. The respirator machines and all these. We really need to be in overdrive. I want to just discuss
Yeah, but
one more thing.
can I just want to say
Yeah.
one thing about that is it's a great idea. We all should be ramping up production, et cetera, et cetera. But it's months to years for the Department of War to build these things. This is not something that is just there's just like a Ford factory that's just pumping these things out
Right.
because it's very specialized manufacturing. And right now I believe it's like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, like the usual suspects that are doing it. They have these are very niche components that you need to have in order to build these things. I don't know what goes into them exactly, but I was reading a whole thing not long ago about just the specific guidance chips or the motors and things that are not easy to procure and not easy to build. It is something that we need to do long in advance, and we don't have that advance notice right now.
And I think one of the things that's really important, by the way, one of the people who we do not talk about enough, who is really talking about important things and doing important things, is Palmer Luckey, who has really been talking about having to
Mhm.
redesign America. You know,
Why don't you
America
explain
has.
that? Other than it being Matt Gates's brother-in-law, who Palmer Luckey is not a fan of his brother-in-law.
That's right.
Why don't you explain to people who Palmer Luckey actually is?
So Palmer Luckey is something of is very a fascinating tech genius. I believe he started Oculus
Correct,
back in the day.
correct. Oculus VR founder, yeah.
Yeah, Oculus VR, which got bought by Meta, and since then
For only 2 billion
he became very well known for his Hawaiian shirts. He
and
wears
his mullet.
Hawaiian shirts and shorts, and there's a great story behind it. But you should look it up on YouTube, Palmer Luckey Hawaiian shirts, and you'll find the story. It's his story to tell, not mine. Um, but he sort of became this eccentric genius, and he's not on the main circuit. But one of the things he's been talking about for the past several years
Hold on.
is
And the word we were looking for was ventilators. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh,
one of the things he's been talking about for years, and he's putting his money where his mouth is by starting a relatively new company that focuses on arms manufacture, is the need to move away from the super expensive, technologically amazing sort of the Star Wars military to practical military that can move cheap and move fast. And so he talks about the need for weapons designers to design weapons with the consideration that auto manufacturers may have to start manufacturing rockets. And so you cannot use the sorts of sophisticated technologies that only Raytheon can use. You have to develop something that, if the country needs it, Ford can start manufacturing interceptors at the same pace as they manufacture cars, because that's the only way to actually be competitive in the war. And so there is somebody who's actively been talking about this, actively been making moves in this direction. I think they've also been quite successful at moving along. I think they had some prototypes that I saw they were displaying recently at a show. There are people thinking about this, but it's also important to say we cannot save money on the military at a time when our enemies are expanding.
and
Yeah.
he has a sentence that I really like that you haven't said, and I just really appreciated it, which is a good enough system delivered in a couple of months beats a flawless system delivered in 10 years. I think that is exactly the point that we're trying to make here, right? Because war punishes lateness more than imperfection, and I think it's just a brilliant perspective. He's building stuff before there's a contract, before they're being asked to build it,
Mhm.
and he's saying, "Hey, I just built this thing. Now you can test it." As opposed to waiting for someone to pay him to do it. And, he's made billions of dollars doing exactly this and might just revolutionize the way we fight wars.
And you know what the thing is? He actually cares. He's
Yeah.
like he actually has a soul. And but one of the last things I want to talk about is this, and this might be a little controversial, but it's not to me. And we were all raised in a certain environment. We all tend to steer towards, when it comes to Jewishness, towards the Orthodox. I'm not saying we are Orthodox, but many of us get our customs from the Orthodox. We don't adhere to some of the things. But one of the things that we don't do go on is we don't because we, how do I say this? if we're doing things that are incorrect, we don't try to bastardize the way we do things to fit into that incorrectness. Does that make sense how I'm saying that? Like,
Is what you're trying to say that when we're doing something that we know is wrong, we do it knowing that we're wrong, and we don't try to tell people that the rules need to be changed to facilitate it?
thank you. You speak Judah. You have fully passed the course on speaking Judah. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for saying that. Go on with Guy just explaining what Judah said. It's very interesting, though, that you have that happening right now, obviously with the Tucker Carlsons and obviously with certain people in that community that, where they're not Christians anymore. Now they're Catholics. They're trying to get around every single thing, every loophole they could find except the actual Bible, except the actual New Testament, and they're trying to rebrand. They're trying to Kabbalize it or what. However, are you like the Reformed? Like what exactly are they?
So in this case, you're speaking about Tucker, or are you speaking
I'm
about
speaking
his
about, yeah.
accolades?
I think there's a huge movement with inside that's trying to bastardize what Christianity is. I don't think there's any question about it, to their ideas of Christianity to fit a narrative that they're trying to tell or a
I,
narrative that they're trying to achieve. Hence, when you have Tucker Carlson saying he wouldn't shoot a 14-year-old with a gun, because it's very easy to tell the 14-year-old and an 18-year-old with a gun to save his family. Like, are you out of your mind? Like, what Bible are you reading from?
Yeah, but he also, I mean, you're talking about not just the hunt for loopholes as opposed to the actual letter of the law or the meaning of the word. That's just selective nonsense. I think
But
it's
no, but that's the same thing with religious. That's the same thing what Reform Jews do. That's the same thing with what many with what offshoots of Orthodox are.
Yeah, but what I mean is when someone like Tucker says that sort of thing, he doesn't even believe that. He's not looking for a loophole so he can justify his behavior according to the New Testament. What he's doing is just lying. It's as simple as that. I wish there was a longer answer. He's just
No, you're
making
right. But the problem is, there's always that original liar that started
right.
the movement. There's always going to be the person that started the reform
Sure,
or the
those people that
constructionist.
treat the Bible or the Torah or the New Testament or whatever it is as a legal obstacle, not a moral compass. Where instead of like, how do I, the goal is how do I get away with this, and I'm looking for the justification instead of going, obviously I shouldn't be doing this, right? Because any look, I'm a writer. This is my job, is to take text and
You've
twist it.
never told us that before.
It's true. It's my gig. But genuinely, when I'm writing characters that are antagonistic, I don't like to say bad guys or villains because the whole point is that that character has to at least believe their own BS, right? They have to be able to justify their desire or their power or their violence. So they twist whatever they need, context and intent be damned, till by the time they're done pretzeling the words and the meaning, it comes out to be, see, I told you so. I was justified all along. And that's not just rules cited selectively or ignored altogether. It's when you actually are saying, I am going to cherry pick verses in order to justify my cruelty or my dishonesty or my abuse or what have you. That's all that is. It's the same way every villain has been written forever. When you watch Thanos in the Avengers say, I'm going to murder half the population of the universe, it's like, but I'm doing it because population control and it'll be good for other people. It's like, oh, well, then you're not a mass murderer. You're helping out. There's always a way to justify. That's all Tucker is doing, is figuring out the loopholes that allow him to not seem like he is Satan and using the, again, twisted letter of the Lord in order to pretend like he is not the inverse and the exverse. That's it.
So just in defense of of sort of some of these movements, historically and theologically speaking, quite often the movements are actually started by people who have a genuine interest in faith-based theology, right? The
Like Thanos.
whether it's the Protestant Reformation and Martin Luther, or whether it's Zachariah Frankel and the Jewish Reformation, right? These are people who genuinely had a theological difference of opinion. But I think Tucker is not a theologian, right? And I think one of the things that people like Tucker identify is the power of faith. And the power of people who are seeking faith is an opportunity not for a faith leader to rise, but for a cult leader to rise.
Perfectly said.
And I think that's what Tucker is trying to
But
become.
don't you
He is
think,
a faith leader of a cult of Christians, of people who are seeking Christ and found an antichrist.
but Guy, don't you think that is where everything comes from, right? That's where obviously where cults come from. That's where
Mhm,
offshoots of religion come from. And yes, I agree with Go On. He's there 100% the villainous reasons why he's doing it. But at
mhm,
the end of the day, it's seeping down to the point where you have a bunch of Nimrods who are following him like he's L. Ron Hubbard. I mean, he's like becoming our mod. I mean, Tucker Carlson right now could write a book about religion and he would have a massive church.
Yeah,
He would.
but they're also, and this is the point that you're making, Judah, and Guy. I know you weren't saying these are one and the same. You're saying that some actually had a good faith disagreement, and some are like weaponizing scripture. But the difference between the honest wrestling with God or with tradition or with conscience is when a true believer says,
mhm,
I this is how I understand it. You know, the scripture is treated as authoritative, even when it's inconvenient, and the context is going to
mhm,
help. That disagreement stems from context, and there's nobody
mhm,
claiming divine monopoly, right? So there's a difference between that and when someone like Tucker is cherry picking verses or stripping context, or and this is very important, flat out lying about what is in the scripture. That's the other thing, by the way, as
mhm.
we're in a world where people don't fact check. They don't fact check what's happening today, much less fact checking what's actually in the scripture. Half the people that believe themselves to be, and forgive me, good Christians have never read the Bible. They have read the verses
Any
that they read
scriptures.
while they're in church, if they go to church. Some of them don't even go to church, but still believe themselves to be good Christians. So when he makes some nonsense up and says, this is what the Bible tells you, or this is his interpretation of what the Bible tells you, like when he pretends that Zionism and love of Israel isn't part of Christian scripture, and you don't know any better, you go, yep, this guy must be telling the truth. So he's doing all of those things. And that is him using the Bible as a weapon, not a
Mm.
compass. That's the
Final,
difference.
well said, both of you. And I appreciate you both expanding the thoughts I could not get out of my brain very well. Well, listen, I was trying to do it in a sort of, a nice way without hurting. Listen, I think anybody that's trying to find a way closer to God, it's a great thing. But oftentimes, those people are also very susceptible
Yeah.
to charlatans.
Be
And they're
very
very,
careful when someone says, if you disagree with me, you are defying God. Watch out for
yeah,
that.
yeah, no, 100%. And something you never heard from come out of Mike Huckabee's mouth. Guy, final thoughts on this?
I agree. I think I do want to give a little bit more credence to the role that theology has had in the shaping of philosophy and modern thinking, because there are genuine disagreements that lead to sects. I think none of that is relevant to the conversations we're having. And I think if people would just go back to synagogues, go back to churches, and actually read the material, learn the material, don't treat your faith as a label, right? It's not an identity. It is a set of values and teachings, and you actually have to go to the lessons to get the degree. And I think if we were to do that, if we were to go back to that as first principles, go read the material, learn the material, discuss the material, we wouldn't. A charlatan like Tucker would have no power over anybody because people would hear him and go, "You're a clown. You have no idea what you're talking about. None of this has anything to do with Jesus."
Yeah, listen, I think when you look at, again, when I brought up Judaism first, when you look at any movement that gets diluted and then gets diluted and gets diluted more, you see what happens. And I am a huge advocate for the evangelical movement. I'm a huge advocate for the Orthodox religious community. And it's more than coincidence that those two communities are extremely pro-America and at the same time extremely pro-Israel. Okay, nobody's ever questioned their dual stuff before now, and I can't. There's nothing that somebody's going to say to me like I wouldn't take away from that, saying it's just because it's been diluted. You wanted to follow things your own way, and obviously people have now found a way to profit on it.
Yeah. But I mean, that's exactly right. Look, the simplest, is stripping it down to the core ideological difference. And this is to both of your points. But I think it's important for everyone to ask themselves the question. It's like JFK's thing of ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Think of that when it comes to God. Good faith religion bends the self towards God. Bad faith religion bends God towards the self. So if you are asking, what does the word of God demand of me? That's the right question, because that's how you stay on the path. And if you are asking, or if someone is asking you, how can we use the word of God to excuse our behavior, or to dominate others, or to radicalize, or to take power, or to whatever it is, that means you're on the wrong path. And that means the person you're following is on the wrong path. And when you listen to someone like Tucker, that's everything. Everything is him using that scripture, or the made up scripture, or the out of context scripture, as a tool to dominate somebody else, as a tool to shut down conversation, as a tool to demonize. That's how you know that he is using it as a Satanist would, and not as a religious person would.
Well said, both of you. And it's time to close up. I think President Trump will give a spectacular State of the Union speech tonight. Very grateful most Democrats will not be there. It'll be far more enjoyable without them. It's just an interesting thing that's going on. Like boycott the State of the Union. Okay, great. We could fit the whole U.S. hockey team in there in your seats, and we're not missing you, fellas. John Fetterman will be there. It's the only Democrat I really care about, and I want to thank you both. Guy, you were absolutely exceptional. Go on, you were even more exceptional when you were able to join us. So it's good to see you. And I want to thank everybody that's been following and listening and just supporting us from the bottom of our hearts. It means the world to us. Thank you. You can find us everywhere at thedailycheatsheet.com. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you all.